Happy Independence Day, guys, and remember, it's only treason if you lose. Today we're making a sign in tribute to Independence Day, July 4th here in America, and we picked out a cool piece of blue pine. Now what we did on this is we put together 2 pieces of blue pine and then we used our dome stencil. We'll have a link right up here to a video how we cut the shape on here using our paper pattern and then turning it into a cutout pattern. So for today we're using several different elements. The first one being the stencil of the month for July 2024. It's only treason if you lose. So we're actually also using the template of the month for July of 2024, and that's George Washington. We're also using one of our scrolls. We've got several of these scrolls over on the website, and this is just an example of how you can add a little flair to your signs. So go check out all this stuff at the website, makeawoodsign.com. In case you haven't heard, we're having a big sale, 4th of July sale, starting tomorrow, 4th of July. Buy one, get one half off. It's gonna be huge. Go check it out, and let's get started.
So like Dad said, guys, this board was already cut and it's kind of a whole process to do, so I will put a link in the description for the video on how to use our patterns and cut shapes, because that's kind of a whole thing in and of itself. So for the layout on this, really we only use the stencil, the template, and then parts of the scroll. So what Dad did is he made a line at the bottom of the board. That way he made sure that the stencil itself was evenly spaced top to bottom and then also left to right. Now you notice that he put it up on a can of paste wax, I think it is. That's so he had room to put those clamps on there, because one thing about the stencils is sometimes they do bow. But taping the sides and putting those clamps on there really allowed him to get that stencil and the template flat on the board, so when he sprays, he gets good clean lines. Now you don't necessarily have to use tape to hold your stencils down. You can use more clamps, or you can use that Tombow self-adhesive tape that we use sometimes. We just decided to try this because I don't think Dad's ever done it before, and it worked out pretty well, but that tape does get kind of expensive, so spring clamps is really the best way to go. Now Dad's making a line and making his marks where he wants the edge of that scroll pattern to go. So when you're using one of our scrolls, you don't have to use the whole thing. This is just kind of a cool little shape that gave the sign a little bit more of that Victorian look, and I think it turned out pretty good. So the first bit Dad's using for this sign is the profile bit at 3/16 of an inch deep. He did about 95% of this sign with just this bit. Now a lot of people ask when they first start carving, like, what do I need to start? And my answer is always the same when it comes to the bits. It's the profile bit, the 60 degree, and the 90 degree bit. Now there's other bits you can get that help do a lot of different things, but you can do about 85-90% of all your carving with just those 3. And the profile is the most versatile of all of them. Now the letters on this stencil are pretty thin and pretty tall, and they have some sharp points to them. So Dad went with the profile bit to do these. But if you'll notice, his profile bit he's using right here is actually a little bit fatter than our standard one. So what happens is, as you use your bit and then you send it in to get it sharpened, you actually end up losing a little bit each time it gets sharpened because you're grinding that away. So what ends up happening is, after maybe 8 to 10 sharpenings, your bit tends to get fatter and you can't do quite as sharp of points as you could with a brand new one. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. So when you have a fatter profile bit, something like this is perfect, because you can set it at the depth you want and it actually gives you a bit of a wider cut. So what you can do is, when you have profile bits that have been sharpened multiple times, you can save those for things like this, to where you need a little bit of a wider cut without having to go past 1/4 of an inch deep. This is a perfect example of how having a fatter profile bit that's been sharpened several times is actually a benefit, as opposed to having a brand new one to do this. You'll notice that when it comes to sharp points, like the bottom of this exclamation mark, Dad doesn't just leave the bit in all the way and run it down and carve it out. He actually feathers it up and feathers it down to give those sharp points. And you can still do that with a fatter profile bit because it still comes to a sharp point. It's just not quite as sharp as a brand new one. Now for the inside of the little scroll areas there, Dad could have used the 90 to go in and take that out, but instead he just dropped his router bit to about 1/4 of an inch deep and he took out what was in there with that. You really don't need to do that with the 90-degree bit. Now to do the inside of the George Washington silhouette, now he's using the 90-degree bit because that's quite a bit of wood in there. And you don't want to take all that out with a profile bit because you're kind of putting unnecessary wear and tear on it. Use the bits that are designed for what you're going to use them for. So Dad's just going in there and he's taking all of that wood out in just kind of a random pattern, and it gives it that cool textured look. For the edge, Dad's just putting a chamfer on the back and the front. The back is a little bit of a smaller chamfer and the front is a much deeper one. I used to say that it was a waste of time to do the back, but to be honest, it makes it look a lot better, and when you give it to somebody, it's got a much more finished look. But one thing you can't forget is that you still got to spray the back if it's got that round over on it. So Dad's using our primer, and this is pine, so he's being real careful because it's not pre-treated, so it might bleed a little bit. So he's making sure not to overspray and let that primer puddle up, because if it puddles, it's definitely going to bleed. There's really no way around that. So when you're spraying, just make sure you do short spurts and keep that can moving, because if it stays in one area, you're going to have some issues. Once it's all dry, which only takes a couple minutes, then he used the 80 grit disc on our disc sander and 120 grit disc on the random orbital to get all of the black off. Make sure you blow off your sign in between those two steps, because if you don't, then you take a risk of grinding that black sawdust into your pine and causing streaks, and man, it could just make a mess. So you always want to blow your sign off in between sanding processes. Now we're going to put some Rust-Oleum clear on there, and man, I really like how this sign looks. It's just clean, simple, and to the point.
So there it is, guys. I really love the way this came out. That blue pine, I picked a special board for this, and I love the grain on the blue pine, especially on that bottom half. This thing is a pretty simple carve. I did it all with a profile bit. It just wasn't that hard to do, and I think it came out great. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Everything that we use today will be in links in the description below. And don't forget, tomorrow, July 4th, Independence Day, we've got a big sale going on. Buy one, get one half off. So check it out. Go over to the website and check it out. If you have any questions, email me, eric@makeawoodsign.com. We love you guys. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.